Most people who drive late nights will tell you the dangerous rides announce themselves. They don't. What happened to me didn't feel dangerous when it started. It felt like a quiet passenger on a quiet street, the kind of ride you forget before you even get home. Except this passenger wasn't a stranger. He just needed me to figure that out on my own. He knew what air freshener I used to hang from my mirror. He knew what I was wearing 8 months before that night. He knew my rating system well enough to track which rides I'd given him across two different names on two different accounts. And he sat in my back seat completely calm, like he was waiting to see how long it would take me to catch up. The part that still doesn't leave me alone isn't what he said. It's what it means for every driver who's never had a passenger say it out loud. I want you to picture this. I want you to picture this. It's close to midnight. You're in your car, and the only light you can see is the glow of your phone sitting in the cup holder. You're exhausted. You've been driving for 9 hours straight. And then one more ride request pops up. You tell yourself, just one more. It'll be quick. That was the worst decision I ever made. My name is Marcus. I'm 29, and at the time this happened, I was living in a mid-sized city in Ohio, the kind of place where the downtown area empties out fast after 10 at night. I'd been driving for a rideshare platform for about 2 years, mostly evenings and weekends to cover rent while I picked up freelance graphic design work during the day. It wasn't glamorous, but it was steady. I knew the city well. I knew the weird passengers, the drunk bar crowds, the late shift nurses who barely said a word the whole ride. I thought I had seen every type of person who could possibly climb into my back seat. I had not. This happened on a Thursday night in late October. I remember the date specifically because my older sister had texted me earlier that day about Thanksgiving plans, and I remember thinking I needed to wrap up early so I could call her back. My goal was to hit a certain earnings number and then go home. By 11:45 p.m., I was close. Close enough that when that last request came in, I accepted it without even really thinking about it. The pickup was on Caldwell Street, which is this long, mostly residential road that runs along the edge of the city. Not a bad area, just quiet. The kind of street where all the porch lights are off by 9. I pulled up to the address and waited. The app said the passenger's name was Daniel. He came out of the shadows at the side of the road, not from the house itself. I remember noticing that and thinking it was a little odd, but I figured he'd been waiting outside or maybe cut through a yard. He was tall, wearing a dark jacket, and he had a backpack slung over one shoulder. He got in the back seat without saying anything. No hey, no nod, nothing. Just settled in and looked straight ahead. I said, "Hey, heading to Birchwood Avenue?" He said, "Yeah." That was it. Now look, I've had plenty of quiet passengers. Some people get in the car and just want silence. And honestly, I respect that. So, I pulled away from the curb, got on the route, and didn't think much of it. I had the radio on low, some late night talk station, and I was just focused on getting him to his destination and getting myself home. But here's where it started. About 4 minutes into the ride, I glanced up at the rearview mirror. Just a habit. You do it automatically. And I caught him staring directly at me. Not at his phone, not out the window. At me. And the second my eyes hit the mirror, he looked away. Slow. Not like someone who got caught zoning out. More deliberate than that. I told myself I was tired. That's what you do, right? You rationalize. Maybe I was just paranoid. We kept driving. The route took us through a stretch of road with no streetlights, just trees on both sides and the occasional mailbox catching my headlights. I checked the mirror again. He was looking at the back of my headrest this time, just staring at it, and I noticed his hands were folded in his lap, completely still. No fidgeting, no phone, nothing. Just sitting there with this total stillness that felt wrong in a way I couldn't explain. I turned down the radio without really meaning to. That's when he spoke. He said, "You've driven me before." I said, "Oh yeah? Small world." He said, "You don't remember," and something about the way he said it made my stomach tighten. Not a question, not small talk, just a flat statement, like he was correcting me on a fact I'd gotten wrong. I said, I give a lot of rides, man. Hard to keep track. He didn't respond to that, just went quiet again. Now, here's the thing, and this is the part that I keep coming back to, even now. I actually did feel something familiar when he got in the car. Something I couldn't place. The way he moved, maybe? Or just some vague sense of recognition that I'd written off as nothing. But after he said that, I started actually trying to remember. Had I driven a Daniel before? I couldn't pull up a face. The name didn't click. I let it go. Or I tried to. We were maybe 3 minutes from his destination when he leaned forward slightly, just enough that I could see more of his face in the mirror, and he said, "Last time, your air freshener was pine, little tree hanging from the mirror." I felt my heart drop. Because he was right. I had one of those little pine tree air fresheners for almost a year. I'd switched to a different one about 6 weeks before this night. It was a small thing, the kind of detail that nobody notices, the kind of detail you would only know if you'd actually been in my car. I kept my voice steady. I said, "Good memory." He said, "I remember a lot of things." I pulled onto Birchwood Avenue and started looking for the drop-off point. I just needed to get him out of the car. My hands were gripping the wheel tighter than they needed to be, and I was watching the street numbers go by, counting down. The destination was a house near the end of the block. I pulled up to the curb, and the app showed the ride as complete. I said, "All right, you're all set." He didn't move. I said it again. "This is your stop, man." He said, "You picked me up on Heller Road once, about 8 months ago. It was raining. You had a Spotify playlist going, something with guitar. You were wearing a gray hoodie." I turned around in my seat. I actually turned around and looked at him directly for the first time. And I want to be careful about how I describe what I saw because I don't want to exaggerate this. He looked completely normal. Average face, calm expression, no visible threat. But his eyes were locked onto mine with this total, unblinking focus that made my skin go cold. I said, "I don't remember that ride." He said, "The name on the account was Kevin." I stared at him. He said, "Kevin." That was the name. Not Daniel. My throat went dry. Because what he was telling me was that he had been in my car under a different name, that he had used a different account, and that he had been watching me closely enough during that ride to remember what I was wearing, what I was listening to, what air freshener was hanging from my mirror. I said, "You need to get out of my car." He tilted his head, just slightly, and he said, "You gave me a 5-star rating." I reached for my phone. I don't even fully know what I was going to do with it. Call someone, screenshot something. I don't know. But the second I moved, he opened the door and stepped out. Smooth, unhurried, like everything was completely fine. He stood on the sidewalk and looked back in through the open door for just a second before he closed it. He didn't say anything else. He just walked toward the house, went around the side of it, and disappeared into the dark. I sat there for probably 30 seconds without moving. Then I locked my doors, pulled away from the curb, and drove. I didn't stop until I was in a lit parking lot about a mile away. I sat there with the engine running and just tried to breathe. Here's what I kept circling back to. The name change. That's the part that wouldn't leave me alone. Because it's not hard to create a second account on a rideshare platform. You just need a different email address. And if someone wanted to book rides under multiple names, different identities, different profiles, there would be almost no way for a driver to know. You get a name on a screen, a pickup location, and a destination. That's it. You don't get a photo of the passenger. You don't get any history. You just unlock your doors for whoever shows up. And whoever this was had shown up twice. I filed a report with the platform that night. I described what happened, gave them both names, Daniel and Kevin, and explained what he'd said. They sent me a generic response about reviewing the information. I followed up twice. I never heard anything specific back. I stopped driving for about 3 weeks after that. When I went back, I installed a dash cam with an interior-facing lens, and I started keeping a small notepad in the center console where I wrote down anything that felt off during a ride. Most nights, nothing went in the notepad. but I never stopped checking it. To this day, I think about the detail that bothered me most. Not the staring, not the names, not even the air freshener thing. It's the fact that he knew I'd given him a 5-star rating. That means he had access to both accounts. He was checking. He was tracking which rides I'd given him, how I'd rated him, what he'd said or done that made me think the ride was fine. He was studying me the same way I was trying to study him, except he'd had an 8-month head start. If you drive for any rideshare platform, I want you to think about something. You accept a request and a name pops up on your screen, and you just trust it. You trust that the person who booked the ride is who the app says they are. But the reality is that anyone can make an account. Anyone can use a different name. And unless you're paying very close attention to the face, to the details, to the small things that don't add up, you might not notice that you've met this person before. I noticed. Barely. And I still don't know what would have happened if I hadn't said something first. Before I go, if any of this felt familiar to you, if you've had a ride that felt wrong, a passenger who knew too much, a detail that didn't line up, drop it in the comments. I read every single one. And if you want to hear the other story I have from that same stretch of months, the one involving a pickup that was scheduled from a location that didn't exist on any map, that one is right here waiting for you. It's worse than this one. I promise you that. Stay safe out there, and maybe think twice before you accept that last ride of the night.